My name's Tim Bristol. I'm the Alaska Program Director for Trout Unlimited. I'm going to talk about two areas where we spend a lot of our time working, and our efforts in Alaska are sort of a blend of policy, law, science, and advocacy. I'm going to talk first about the Tongass, our largest national forest at 17 million acres, down in the southeastern part of the state, also known as the Panhandle. And then I'm going to talk about Bristol Bay and some of the challenges surrounding management of the world's greatest remaining sockeye salmon fishery. One of the things we've been working on for the last few years is trying to, for lack of a better term, play some offense in Southeast Alaska. For many years, the work that we did in Southeast Alaska trying to protect watersheds in the Tongass National Forest was a defensive game. In the mid-1990s, our congressional delegation, Senators Ted Stevens, Frank Murkowski, and Don Young in the House of Representatives, Don's still there, really tried to increase the amount of logging, unravel some of the hard-won protections for the forest. And you know, it's a really incredible place. It's this archipelago. It's a temperate rainforest. It's one of the rarest ecosystems on the planet. The big drivers of the regional economy are fishing and tourism and government. But there was a legacy of logging, and it was a very difficult transition for some of the communities. In our delegation, we're sort of wedded to those ideas of the past and really wanted to continue to sort of lock in that unsustainable level of logging. Through a lot of advocacy, policy work, help from people across the United States who really sort of embraced the fact that it was also their forest. It wasn't just the home of the people who live there. We were able to make some very significant changes to the way the Tongass was managed. We have a pretty decent forest plan now. Our work now is to try to really take that next step and permanently protect the most important salmon-producing watersheds in Southeast Alaska over the long term, and we want to do that through the United States Congress. So it's another one of those things where everybody can lend a shoulder to it across the United States. Our proposal, we're calling it the Tongass 77, represents what we refer to as the best of the best. It's habitat from 15 of the 22 biogeographic provinces in the region. These are largely intact watersheds. They're all currently open to development, and we tried to base it on very important habitat values. The number one habitat value for us at Trout Unlimited, since we are a fisheries advocacy organization, is salmon and trout production. But we wanted to talk about more than the fact that these are just biologically productive and incredibly beautiful places. Salmon fishing in the region is big business. It's the single largest private employer in Southeast Alaska. The region has about 75,000 people. About 1 in 10 people who live there derive their living from salmon fishing. And commercial sport and subsistence fishing pursuits pump nearly $1 billion a year into the regional economy. So this isn't just about, you know, locking a place up, as some critics would say in Alaska. It's really about locking in place some of the real economic drivers of the region. And those areas that are still open to development, there are threats. It's not as bad as when I was cutting my teeth as a grassroots organizer in the region in the mid-90s, but we have privatization proposals in the United States Congress right now, including a proposal that I think we can probably stop, but I may be calling on people from Minnesota to help us with the effort to transfer 2 million acres of the 17 million acre Tongass to the state of Alaska. Alaska would then probably spend most of their time trying to cut it down as fast as possible. There's a lot of mineral development, and we're going to talk a lot more about mining in a few minutes. A lot of energy projects. Some are good, some are scaled appropriately. They're sited in areas that don't have fish values, and they're really about local need. But then there are a few very large proposals that are really geared towards an export market to facilitate development in northern British Columbia and even export of power down to the Pacific Northwest. And that's always one of the big challenges in Alaska, is trying to get things scaled appropriately. People, they think big and they dream big and they want to do everything in a big way. One other issue we're not going to talk about today, and it's probably another one that's going to end up on the TU priority list, is the construction of the largest dam since the Hoover Dam on the Susitna River, which flows into Cook Inlet north of Anchorage. So you see people across the country kind of moving in one direction when it comes to large dams, and we're moving in the opposite direction. So we stay busy in Alaska. And we see the Tongass 77 as a very proactive way to try to protect some of the best habitat in the region. We're proposing a quasi-wilderness designation. I like to refer to this land use designation 2 designation, which is unique to the Tongass National Forest, as a place where you can do anything you want except ruin the land. You can fish there, you can hunt there, you can trap there, you can camp. There's some limited development allowed, but it really is about keeping these watersheds in an intact, productive status. Just a few more fish facts about Southeast Alaska, and there's fish all throughout this presentation since we are TU, and it's in our DNA to work on fisheries and fishing issues. Over 5,000 cataloged anadromous streams. About 70% of all the salmon produced from the National Forest system comes from the Tongass. So it's a really amazing place. It's a very rare ecosystem type, and we're in pretty good shape. I'd say that for the most part, what's happened in Southeast Alaska is a success story, and we're just trying to sort of make sure that that continues on for many generations. Now I'm going to talk about the thing that takes up most of the time and the energy of the Alaska program staff these days, and that's trying to preserve and protect Bristol Bay from unsustainable mining development. Some of you may have heard about a proposal to build what would be the world's largest open pit gold and copper mine at the headwaters of the greatest remaining sockeye salmon fishery in the world. The mine is referred to as Pebble. One of the early geologists flew over the area and thought it reminded him of the golf course at Pebble Beach. Sort of a typical landscape out in the region. It's this republic of lakes and rivers and streams. It's probably, well, it's without a doubt the greatest place in the world for sockeye salmon. You have these long, low gradient rivers leading to these enormous lakes, and it was just tailor-made for the production of sockeye salmon in particular. To give you a little better indication of where it is, about 250 miles southwest of Anchorage. This is a map of the region. The area that contains the Pebble Prospect and some other secondary mineral claims is that red area up up above Lake Iliamna. Iliamna, just for scale, is the largest freshwater lake in Alaska. It's about 110 miles long, about 20 miles wide. And really that area kind of represents the missing piece of the conservation puzzle in the region. You have Wood-Tick-Chick State Park, largest state park in the United States at 1.9 million acres. You have Katmai National Park, which is just a spectacular destination, home to brown bears and a lot of other incredible wildlife. And then you have Lake Clark National Park, and in its management principles is the protection and propagation of wild salmon. The area that includes the Pebble Prospect is on state land. At one point it was considered for transfer to the federal government and to be put in a protected status as the Iliamna Game Refuge. Unfortunately, it kind of ended up not making into the legislation in 1980 that led to this landmark lands protection bill known as the Alaska National Interest Lands Conservation Act. Early after that decision in 1980, I don't think there was anybody in power in the state of Alaska at that time that would have anticipated what we're dealing with right now. This place has always been on a pedestal, even by Alaska standards. A little bit more about the issue that takes up a lot of our time and energy. The Pebble Mine is one of several mines that could rise up above Lake Iliamna. The Pebble proposal, based on data we received in 2006 when the developers, a consortium of companies, there's a junior from Vancouver, Northern Dynasty, and Anglo-American, one of the major mining companies that operates all around the world. They applied for temporary water withdrawal permits. And as soon as that information went to the public, Alaskans just, for lack of a better term, or they freaked out. I mean, there's just no getting around it. Even, Alaska's a very pro-development state, but when people saw the scale and the scope and the location of this mine proposal, you saw a very diverse set of interests come together for probably the first time in the history of the state to try to stop this from happening. Like I said, it's the headwaters of the largest remaining sockeye salmon fishery in the world. Last year, the commercial salmon fleet caught 30 million fish, and That has proven sustainable. There's a 100-year history of commercial fishing in the region, and some of the experts that have been studying the health and the populations of the fishery over time think that there are as many salmon coming back to the rivers and lakes of Bristol Bay as ever. So it's a real success story. It's a real story about intensively, sustainably managed, very productive fishery. It's not it's an inhabited, it's a working wilderness. It doesn't just sit out there as a pretty place. It's a lot more to a lot more people than that. And the whole idea of building a mine of enormous scale and scope at the headwaters has brought together commercial fishermen, sport fishermen who comprise the majority of the people who work for Trout Unlimited and our membership, and subsistence users, the people who have lived off the land for millennia. Traditionally, we butt heads pretty hard. And this has been one place where we've really sort of all teamed up together. We have a really good working relationship. We took the extra step of moving beyond our fly fishing tradition and hiring a few commercial fishermen to be on staff. And we give each other a hard time every once in a while, but it's been very successful, and it's really helped us build some very durable bridges to other constituencies. And I'm going to talk really briefly about what we're trying to do to permanently protect the region. This is just an area that includes Ground Zero, the Pebble Mine site. Frying Pan Lake is right in the middle of where the pit would go for the proposed mine. And upper and lower, upper Tulare Creek flows directly into Lake Iliamna. And then the south and north forks of the Cocktulies eventually drain all the way out to Bristol Bay through Dillingham, Alaska, which is the chief fishing port and the major community out there. And this is sort of the proposal we saw back in 2006 that caused so much concern for the residents of Alaska and people who come to Bristol Bay from all over the world. You can see down at the bottom the scale of the original proposal, a pit and a couple of tailings disposal or containment facilities that were over 5 miles long. Exploration has continued in earnest by the mineral companies, and they've discovered a lot more resource. It's one of the largest gold and copper deposits ever found in the world. So you're looking at a pretty incredibly large development here, 15 miles by 10 miles. And it just continues to grow. The estimates continue to increase as to what they're going to try to extract. We're up to about 10.78 billion tons of ore. When we started to talk about the scale of this, Bristol Bay is a little ways away from the population centers of Alaska. This is a map of Anchorage, the major city of Alaska. There's about 260,000 people living there. And we tried to figure out ways to just let them know just how big the Pebble prospect is, how much bigger it is than all the other mines that have been developed in the state. There is a place for mining in Alaska. I think it's the size, type, and location of Pebble that makes it so disturbing, and it's what brought Trout Unlimited into the battle. We're not an anti-mining organization by any stretch of the imagination. But when you start laying graphics out like this for the public, it really helps us generate a lot of concern. Pebble has become a very different issue than many of the other resource battles that we've had in the state. If you ask the average Alaskan, matter of fact, I just saw polling yesterday, whether they support drilling in the Arctic National Wildlife Refuge, about 75 to 77% of Alaskans say, yeah, we should drill there. You have similar levels of support for offshore oil and gas leasing in the Beaufort and Chukchi Sea. You ask them about Pebble, and about 60% of the state population is opposed to Pebble. So it really gives us a very strong foundation for our work. This is a photo of the proposed mine site. Really incredible place. As you can see, there's just a little bit of water there. It's a very complex hydrological system out there. The transfer of ground and surface water is, no one really has a very good handle on it. There's a lot of people doing work right now to see if they can understand it a little better. We did a little artistic rendering of what one of the earthen dams would look like, about 2 to 3 miles across, 700 feet high. There would be another, there would be 2 more earthen dams associated with the main tailings containment facility, making up the largest dam complex in the world. These would be some of the largest excavations in the history of mankind. And it's all sitting in a saddle between the 2 major drainages of the greatest sockeye salmon fishery left in the world, a source of tremendous pride to those of us in Alaska, and a resource of not only national but international significance. And these are the most recent estimates of the amount of waste that would be stored behind these tailing ponds, these tailings dams. Threw one more slide in there just to give you a little more scale and scope. One of the other big challenges, I talked about the size of the mine, we talked about the location, and then there's the type of mine. It's a sulfide ore body. The potential for acid mine waste generation is extremely high. It's a low-grade ore deposit. It's about 99% waste. And then if you look at these types of mines, there's a very bad track record around the country when it comes to making sure they don't leak, that nothing goes wrong. In some places, a certain amount of exceedance of water quality standards may be within the margin of error and may be tolerable in such a wet environment where there's so much transfer of surface and groundwater leading to these streams that people depend upon for their very existence. We think that the risk is just too high. And as I mentioned before, it's also the source of jobs and income for the people of the region. About 75% of local employment is derived from commercial fishing, and it represents somewhere between $280 and about $400 million a year. Fishing is still a growth industry. There's still ways for that industry to extract more revenue from each fish caught. One of the things we've been encouraging is, having people ask their grocery store to carry Bristol Bay sockeye salmon and making that choice. It might be a little more expensive, but it tastes better and it's better for you. And you know that by eating this and buying this, you're actually doing something to help protect the environment. And it may be a little counterintuitive. We did make up these bumper stickers that really endeared us to the fishing fleet that said, do your part to save wild salmon, eat one. We feel that having a strong economic base in these coastal communities is crucial if we're going to be able to stave off this kind of development. There is the promise of a lot of wealth for certain people in the state, and there will be a significant number of jobs associated with the mine. And we feel we have to have that constructive alternative. We can't just complain about the environmental impacts if we think that we're going to be able to reach that political critical mass to do the right thing. Sport fishing is also big business. It's one of the greatest places in the world to go to catch rainbow trout. Generates over $160 million a year in revenue and employs over 1,200 people. There's probably about 75 lodges, and they run the gamut from sort of broken down, reconditioned trappers' shacks to these palatial lodges that charge $8,500 a week for guests. So it's a sport fish destination that people from around the world come to visit and experience. And again, it's another one of these sustainable industries. One of the things we're trying to do at Trout Unlimited is ensure that more of the local peoples, the Alaska Native people who make up about 85% of the population there, start to get some of these jobs in the sport fishing industry and make it more of a locally owned economic driver. And it's been really fun to bring in a series of instructors and take these kids who have grown up in a pretty traditional hunting and gathering subsistence lifestyle and try to talk about catch and release. They deride catch and release as playing with your food, and we're trying to explain to them that with fish like rainbow trout, maybe catching them a few times is a good thing. But we're starting to bridge those cultural gaps, and it's been really enjoyable. And I'll tell you what, just with a little bit of instruction, you have some pretty amazing guides very quickly because they know the country so well. And then subsistence, last but not least, as far as the interests out there, there's about 7,500 people who are actively engaged in hunting and gathering. Salmon is the number one protein source. If you were to try to apply a replacement cost to that protein, it would be in the millions of dollars. But more than that, it's really the foundation of the culture out there. And it's something that people have done. It's the way they've lived for thousands of years. And these are the folks that I think that we work for. And it's been a real privilege to get to understand the way these communities work, and really, they've really been a real source of inspiration to us. The depth of feeling, the courage they display, the fact that they're in large numbers essentially saying that we don't care how much money you offer us, we don't care how many promises of jobs you dangle in front of us, we're just not going to do this. And the polls have bared that out. This one's a little bit old, but as I said, I received some new polling data yesterday, and it's still about 80% of the local population as opposed to mine development. And that's despite the fact that the Pebble Partnership has spent millions of dollars doing community outreach and making a lot of promises about what they're going to do and how nothing's ever going to go wrong. It's not something that we can do alone in Alaska, and we've slowly but surely tried to build the public awareness for protection of Bristol Bay. We've worked with a very diverse cross-section of people across the United States, from the National Council of Churches to jewelers, led by Tiffany and company. They have pledged never to source gold from the Pebble Mine, and very interesting ally to have a jewelry company on your side. And then just here's an advertisement that's running a lot of hunting and fishing magazines around the country. A lot of heavy hitters in the outdoor industry have also weighed in saying that our clients buy our products to go to a place like Bristol Bay. We don't want to see it compromised in any way. And we've done a little celebrity outreach. This is Sig Hansen from The Deadliest Catch. Helps us reach out to another demographic, including people like my dad, who really never understood what I did as an environmentalist in Alaska for all those years. And as soon as he saw me hanging out with Sig Hansen and talking to Sig Hansen, I was okay in his eyes. So Sig runs a tender out there in Bristol Bay in the summer. He takes fish from the small gill netters and then brings them back to the processing plants when he's not out in the Bering Sea catching crab. The next steps for us is to continue to build this opposition, build the support for protection of Bristol Bay. At the state level, we've filed a legal challenge against the management plan that was it was changed in very significant ways in 2005 that paved the way for mineral exploration. Up until 2005, the state had really focused on propagation of salmon, protection of subsistence resources in their management directive. That changed when our former Senator Frank Murkowski became governor. There was talk of this huge mineral deposit at Pebble, and they just gutted it. They reduced the habitat protections in the management plan by 94%. So we're cautiously optimistic that we may have some success in the courts, because they really did sort of go overboard with their development approach. And then build support in Congress and federal agencies, work to make Bristol Bay a national icon, a one-of-a-kind place, and then convince the EPA to use a provision of the Clean Water Act to protect the area. They have that power under the Clean Water Act. We're asking them to essentially say, we are not going to give you a 404 or a dredge and fill permit for the purposes of construction and operation of Pebble. They've never done this before. They've never done it proactively before a company has applied for permits. But we figured if this isn't the place to use this provision of the Clean Water Act, then we don't know where it is. And if we don't do it now, they probably never will use it. So, and this is just sort of the authority under the Clean Water Act to do this thing. This power does reside with the administrator, whomever that may be, now that Lisa Jackson has left. But this decision probably will be made at the highest levels of the White House. And our effort over the next couple of years is to convince the decision makers that this is something they should tackle. This should be one of their conservation priorities, and we think it's really important to mix in that jobs and culture message. And we think it's a pretty powerful argument, and that's essentially what we've been up to in Alaska. And that's it. Thank you very much, and I'll answer any questions if you have them.